I've been saving up all of my extra patience from this week, which honestly is not a lot, for today. This recipe has bested me more times than I care to admit. It always tastes good, but I have trouble with the texture. You win some, you lose some. In the case of sweet potato gnocchi, you lose some, you lose some. They're pretty bad. Those darn sweet potatoes, it's their fault. Good morning, welcome back to my kitchen. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I have my game face on. I am in a head-to-head battle with an Italian dumpling. If you've never had gnocchi before, they're a pasta, but the best way I can describe them is little Italian dumplings. They're traditionally made of potato or ricotta or a combination of the two, or sweet potato, though there's tons of different ways that you can make them. For me, the ingredient list is not what's hard. The difficulty comes in the texture. I want something that is not doughy, is not gummy, is soft and pillowy, and holds up to the brown butter sage sauce that I'm going to put with it today. So the place that I failed in the past is the ratio of flour to sweet potato. I end up having to add way too much flour to get a dough that I can work with. And from what I've read, flour should only make up about 20% of the end result. And every time I've done this, I've ended up using a lot more than that. So I'm scaling it back to the basics today, gonna start from the most simple place possible and let you know what I learn along the way. If you have a tried and true sweet potato gnocchi recipe, please leave it in the comments below. The method to make gnocchi, not complicated. Bring together the dough, shape it into a log, cut it into little pillows, form it around some sort of form to provide some texture in the gnocchi so that the sauce sticks to it a little bit better, and then we boil it. No special tools or equipment necessary to make gnocchi. In fact, several of the things I have on the bench are not even necessary. I have a sheet pan covered in parchment. This is where our gnocchi will rest before it goes into the boiling water. I have a potato masher to mash the sweet potato, and then a fork. This is where it gets interesting. You can shape your gnocchi over a variety of tools. A fork is somewhat traditional, or a gnocchi board, but I've seen people shape gnocchi over all sorts of different things. We're gonna start with a fork today because that's the method that I've used most frequently. At the end of this process, I'm gonna make a really simple brown butter sage sauce, which is exactly what it sounds like, brown butter and a whole bunch of sage. If all else fails and our gnocchi are not the soft, pillowy, delicious gnocchi of my dreams, I'm just gonna drench it in butter and sage. The first step of sweet potato gnocchi happened earlier this morning. I threw about 5 sweet potatoes into a 400-degree oven and roasted them until they were soft. Pulled them out, took their skins off, and measured out 500 grams of sweet potato. You can actually do this in the microwave and it takes much less time. Don't forget to pierce the sweet potatoes with a fork, wrap them in a wet paper towel, and check them every 5 minutes or so. Probably will take like 15 to 20 minutes depending on the power of your microwave. So we've got soft roasted sweet potatoes on the bench. I have 1 egg. I'm only gonna use the yolk of this egg, a little bit of salt, and some regular all-purpose flour. Where I'm starting today is 100 grams of sifted all-purpose flour to 500 grams of sweet potato. We'll see what the dough looks like at that point. Historically, it's been really wet for me, and I've had to add quite a bit more flour, but that'll be a great place for us to start, and we'll see what happens. First step is to mash the sweet potatoes. So if you have a potato ricer, that's probably even an easier way to do this, but these sweet potatoes are so soft that they'll mash up really easily. The goal here is to not have any big chunks of sweet potato. The dumplings that we're making are like 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. You can make them however big you want. You just wanna make sure that you get all of the big lumps and bumps out of your sweet potato. Sweet potato mashed. Now to the egg. I'm gonna add an egg yolk, white into my container here. Yolk into our bowl. Using a spatula, I'm gonna incorporate the egg into the sweet potato. So one of the things I've been thinking about with this recipe is that sweet potatoes are pretty moist. A potato, at this point, would be significantly less moist. So I think that's one of the reasons why I've had to use so much more than 100 grams of flour. But again, I'm gonna start with this as the baseline and continue to tweak going forward. Into fine mesh sieve, start with 100 grams of flour, 102, and add the salt. So we're gonna start here, sift this in and see what happens. The goal is to be able to roll this dough out into long log shapes. We're not anywhere close. It's still incredibly sticky, which is what I found in the past. So we're gonna keep going with the flour. 375 grams of flour, and I think we've got something that I can work with on my bench. So that is definitely way more than 20%, but this dough feels a little bit different than the doughs I've made in the past, but generally we've got what I think is a dough ball. So the next step, on a clean bench, I'm gonna sift a little bit of flour and we're gonna turn our dough out. Okay, dough out. So at this point, I'm gonna cut this into 4 different pieces using my bench scraper and start working with one. And I want to roll this out into a log. Try to get even thickness. This looks about the right width to me. So now using my bench scraper, I'm just gonna cut these into little pillows. So thinking about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, trying to make them as even as I can. Little pillows. Cool. Cleaned up a little bit, and we have sweet potato gnocchi. I have put about 3/4 of what I made in the freezer. Gnocchi freeze beautifully. At this point, all you do on a cookie sheet, separated like this, toss them into your freezer, let them flash freeze. Once they're frozen, put them into a Ziploc, bag them, tag them, put them back in the freezer. You don't want to freeze them in a Ziploc from this stage because they'll all just stick and clump together. But the only thing that you need to do when you take them out of your freezer is perhaps give them like a few more seconds in the boiling water. The next step is shaping the gnocchi. And I've seen 1,000 different chefs do this 1,000 different ways. You can actually just leave them like this if you want to. The reason for shaping gnocchi, one of the ways to do that is with a fork, is so that the sauce can better stick to the pasta. It can be as simple as just using your thumb and putting a little divot in the center of them. Or a more traditional way is to use a gnocchi board or a fork. The goal is to take the gnocchi, push it down, and roll it over the tines of a fork so that you end up with something that's got ridges on one side and a hole on the other side. So these gnocchi will cook for just a couple minutes. And the way you know they're done is when they float. So you put them in salted boiling water, just like traditional pasta. And when they start to float, they're done. At the same time, we're going to make a brown butter and sage sauce. So I'm just gonna get a few tablespoons of butter in a saucepan right beside my gnocchi pot. Get that browning before we put our gnocchi in. So I'm not being too careful about the pasta water here because I'm gonna add a little pasta water anyway to make a sauce out of this. Last one. Okay, an update. They're not great. Maybe we can bring them back with a nice brown butter sage sauce. If we do our job right, this should emulsify down into a nice sauce. Some parm right over the top. So just let it keep cooking a little bit. I'm gonna add a little bit of the pasta water. This is 1/8 of a cup, so a couple tablespoons. A little bit of salt. And it's starting to come together as a sauce. Okay, our gnocchi may not be the best as expected. My patience is also almost gone, but the sauce is gonna taste delicious. We're all done. I'm gonna plate some of this up. Well, you win some, you lose some. In the case of sweet potato gnocchi, you lose some, you lose some. You really can't go wrong with cheese and butter. The sage is delicious in brown butter, so the flavors will be good. They're pretty bad. They're not the worst gnocchi I've ever made, if I'm honest. I've made much worse than this. Honestly, the texture's horrible, but they taste really good. Okay, so most important, what I'm gonna change next time. Back to the drawing board with the ratios. I have to somehow get more moisture out of the sweet potatoes, so that's something I'm gonna consider as well. And maybe it's a combo of sweet potato plus potato. But regardless, I'm gonna do a whole bunch of research, see what people that are actually skilled in making gnocchi do. And we're gonna get redemption on this one. I'll be back with it. Okay, so it's a couple days later. I'm in the kitchen making some other recipes with a sink full of dirty dishes and a whole bunch of other things to do, but I cannot stop thinking about how badly I failed at sweet potato gnocchi. I've gotta wind it back to basic old potato gnocchi and just remind myself that I do know how to make that. And then from there, I think it's time to do a ton more research about sweet potato gnocchi in particular and try it again at some point. But redemption on regular potato gnocchi first. On my bench, I have 500 grams of russet potatoes that I baked and grated. 1 single egg yolk, 100 grams of flour, some more flour for rolling, and then a well-used cookie sheet with a piece of parchment, and also a fly that I cannot get rid of and have been trying to kill for like 6 hours. So I'm just gonna get going and have positive hope that the big pot of boiling water I have on the stove is gonna cook me up some gnocchi that are way better than what I made before. Just some butter this time. No elaborate sauce necessary. Those darn sweet potatoes, it's their fault. These are pretty good. They're not perfect gnocchi. I'm still not an expert at this, but they came together in like 10 minutes. They're significantly better than my sweet potato ones. All right, we still got it. So the one good thing about cooking is that it's not that serious. Yes, this was a failure, but I still have a pretty decent tasting lunch if you can ignore the texture, which I will. It's like I'm paying penance by eating what I've created. Oh, thank you for spending your time with me today. Let's cross our fingers that the next one goes better. If you liked this video or hated it, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more from me, and honestly, there's more successes than failures, please subscribe to my channel. And I will look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers.